This episode first aired on our new channel, Leaders in Tech and E-commerce podcast. It covers supply chain tech in depth. We do hope you enjoy it and feel free to follow our other podcast as well for the latest episodes.
It is great to have with us today Andrew Kirkwood. Andrew is the Chief Executive Officer at BluJay Solutions. With 25 years of experience in the supply chain and SaaS market, Andrew provides leadership to the BluJay organization through the creation of vision, strategic, tactical, and financial plans, along with the organizational and goal development, performance measurement, and liaising with stakeholders. He joined BluJay in January 2019 after a successful 14-year career at RedPrairie and JDA Software, now BlueYonder, in a number of senior roles. BluJay Solutions helps companies around the world achieve excellence in logistics and trade compliance. It's in their DNA. Through a blend of data, networks, and applications delivered in the BluJay Way, the platform powers the frictionless supply chain for thousands of the world's leading manufacturers, retailers, distributors, freight forwarders, custom brokers, carriers, and logistics service providers. 7,500 plus customers. BluJay conducts business in 112 countries, has 1,200 plus employees worldwide, and powers a global network of over 50,000 customers, carriers, freight forwarders, and service providers. Hello, Andrew. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the podcast today.
Nice to be with you.
And let's start with an introduction, because I was looking through your CV and it is impressive, but I wanted to hear from yourself, what are some of the main milestones of your career? And maybe most importantly, what is most exciting about being the CEO of BluJay?
Yeah, so I've really been brought up in supply chain. You know, from the moment I studied geography, which whilst a lot of people think it's mapping, actually it's a lot about transportation, logistics, those sorts of things. Actually, my dissertation was based on transport and logistics. I got really excited in supply chains all those many years ago. And throughout my career, from being a graduate trainee at CHEP, the pallet company, through into technology with Dallas Systems that eventually became a company that's part of Infor. I think the really big move for me was joining Manhattan Associates when they didn't actually have an office outside of the US. Actually, I was part of the team that set up the office in Europe, just west of London. And we started from nothing. And, you know, going from a company like Dexian that, you know, had offices and space and infrastructure to literally nothing really taught me. You know, we had to do support, we had to do implementations, we had to do sales. So very quickly, you know, I learned on the job, and it was really exciting times. Manhattan had also just gone public very successfully. And, you know, we went through a period of tremendous growth, and I still have many friends and colleagues from that wonderful time. So I think really it was Manhattan that taught me a huge amount. And then in terms of developing my skills as a leader, very much that came through at RedPrairie and into JDA, now BlueYonder, where whilst I spent significant time there through the acquisitions, through the various different job roles that I did whilst I was there, it was like changing company many, many times. And, you know, I look at all the fantastic colleagues I've worked with, as well as some very, very strong CEOs. You know, I like to think that I've listened and learned and taken little elements of some of the really good things that they did and brought that to bear with my own style. So, you know, that's kind of what I've tried to bring to BluJay, which is, you know, learning from great leaders, but putting my distinct style and taking, you know, what's really a very good company. I inherited a really good business, but, you know, we aspire to be most of our supply chain execution company in the world. That's our goal, not necessarily the biggest, but really admired. And that's what we're working towards.
That sounds great. And I like that part with admired. And of course, you have some strong chips on the shoulder like Manhattan and RedPrairie and now BlueYonder. I'm sure, like you said, there's very interesting lessons. Maybe we talk about a few of them later. But coming back to BluJay, I always ask this question at the beginning, and I know you have a very strong sales experience. How would you say BluJay is different compared to the other players in the market?
Well, I think what's different is that we are more than just an application provider. And I think we're doing a better job of explaining and articulating that. But we talk about BluJay DNA, which is data, networks, and applications. And applications are right at the core of our business. The things like transportation and compliance, custom software, those sorts of things. But we have our network that has many, many, many companies, thousands of companies interacting with our customers through our applications. And then finally, because we're a cloud-first business and we have solutions predominantly on the cloud, we have amazing data. We understand what goods are moving around the world in terms of through, being declared through customs declarations, transportation and the costs. And we're extracting that data to give better insights to our customers. And so I think those things combined make us slightly different than traditional businesses, as well as we call it the BluJay Way, which is the way we deliver those services. So, a number of our customers maybe have quite small logistics departments. So we help those customers with logistics services that complement their business as well. So I think, again, slightly different that we have logistics experts within our business helping our customers operate our software more effectively. And that's part of what we call the BluJay Way. So I think those things combined make us a little bit different to what I call a traditional supply chain software company.
I understand. I wanted to talk about data because you are a platform company. You have access and you see a lot of different silos of data, different trends. And we've been through and we are still going through quite important crises on a number of fronts, from humanitarian to social to economic. Now, if we would take this data and then look at supply chain trends that you see happening in the next few months and maybe even longer term, what would you say the most important trends are?
I think in terms of the supply chain, what the pandemic has proved is that historical data will not help you in a crisis like this because it's unplanned. It's not happened before. If it happened, it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so I believe that we're going to see the further digitization of the supply chain. And by that, I mean leveraging data in a different way than we do today. And so planning systems are going to need to leverage real-time data to be more effective and more responsive. And that's where I think companies like BluJay come in, because we've got in the cloud all of that real-time data. And we saw some of those trends, whether it be transportation falling off, but also picking back up again. So how do we leverage that data and allow, some of those planning applications to use that to help the supply chains be far more optimal and increasingly responsive going forwards? And that's something we're working with. And I think, that partnership you mentioned with LLamasoft is a great illustration. That company's got some of the best strategic supply chain algorithms out there. We could spend many years trying to build that capability. And rather than doing that, we've collaborated where we're using our data in the cloud, pairing that with LLamasoft's great, intellectual horsepower, let's call it. And the combination creates one of the great, best modeling solutions out there. And the great thing is that we've brought that to market much faster than we ordinarily would do. So that's a great illustration where, companies that may not have collaborated previously have done, and in a sense it's for the greater good. It's for helping customers better use the data that they've created to help them plan their supply chains more effectively.
And I agree with that. And I think if there is a silver lining in this crisis, partnerships and new partnerships or stronger partnerships is definitely one of them. I would like to go a bit deeper in the partnership that you have with LLamasoft. I'm curious how it started and where do you see it developing? And I'm also curious if you can share some of the go-to-market examples or implementations that happened and what were some of the results.
Well, actually, we were a user of LLamasoft. We actually have a strategic team. I mentioned we have logistics services that we use with our customers to complement their internal logistics teams. And we have a small strategic team that help look and analyze, how they use their transportation and where they have the DC's located, etc. So we were a user of that technology. Obviously, I worked with Razat, the CEO at LLamasoft, but importantly, there were relationships through my Chief Product Officer, David Landau, and others that meant that as they developed their technology to be available on the cloud, it was natural for them to come and approach us and talk to us about how we could partner further. I think it's great. We've both got major offices in Michigan, so we're not far from each other. We have around 350 people in Holland, Michigan, and they're based just outside of Detroit in Ann Arbor. And that also facilitated that cooperation. So we would, I guess, naturally came together. We have some shared customers. And what I would say is that this wasn't customer driven, this was innovation led. So it was our two companies combining, looking at our complementary skills and developing this modeling technology. And it's now that we're working with customers in terms of implementing and developing it. So I'd say it was very much innovation first, and us proactively developing it rather than being customer led.
And now talking about customers and clients, and being an exceptional period we are going through, I was wondering, what are some of the questions or requests that you receive most often from your current clients, current portfolio? Is there maybe a trend there as well?
Yeah, I think that, we're seeing customers, the first thing they need from us is availability and a solution that's reliable and robust. And that's the first thing. Something that comes to mind is a food manufacturer that, saw a huge spike in demand for their essential products as the pandemic hit. And, if your solution requires that much demand, you've got to have something that can instantly scale. And I think that's something that we're really proud of, that we could, at a technology level, cope with that. But then what we've also done is, because we have huge amount of data relating to pricing, spot pricing, all of those things, we've made that available to all our customers so that they could keep their freight moving at as effective cost as possible, and in turn keep prices down for the consumers. So we've made that available to everybody. We call it Freight Market Index and our spot capacity pricing to any customer that wants to use it. So I think, it's responding to a crisis. It's thinking about more than just our business. It's about, people, humanity. It's about all of our customers. And I like to think that we've stepped up during this pandemic to be as responsive as we possibly can be.
And you mentioned this food manufacturer. I don't know if you can share some numbers, or maybe you have some other examples of clients who have seen excellent results working with the solution from BluJay. Is there an example or some specific numbers you could share about this?
Well, not specifics, because obviously I've got to respect reality. But to give you, just to reiterate, our transportation solution that predominantly we use in North America, we saw a 40% volume surge as the pandemic hit. Now, we do have a lot of food and beverage suppliers on our solution, and obviously we saw that stockpiling. But that's an incredible demand spike, makes Christmas look, very small. So that creates a lot of challenges. That creates challenges from as I said, a system capacity perspective. You've got to make sure you can scale. But obviously you see a spike in demand and pricing, and you also had driver shortages, because obviously drivers got sick and were asked to self-isolate if they thought they were sick. So you had this perfect storm. And so, we had to be just very, very responsive in that scenario, and make sure we ensure business continuity. And I'm very proud that, we migrated almost overnight to remote working for 1,300 associates. We have, still 1,300 pretty much associates working remotely, and we've maintained continuity. We did put steps in place for remote working. We extensively used video prior to this. So the idea of Zoom or GoToMeeting calls was not unique to us. It was something we did really, really very proactively. So in terms of, absolute numbers, as I said, I'm going to be a little bit careful in respecting our customers' data. And we are, I'm pleased to say, starting to see across our systems trade moving somewhere towards normal levels. And again, we talk about our data, we anonymize the data, but we do use it to look at trends in things like global trade. A lot of declarations are done through our systems, and we are starting to see that recovery coming through. And I'm reasonably positive that the recovery can be V-shaped rather than the doom and gloom economists looking at that U-shaped recovery. I'm reasonably positive that the economy was put on pause and we're going to restart that, and this pandemic will be with us for some time, and we've just got to work through it. The world needs to get going again. What we need to do is create a climate where people understand the risks, that they understand how to stay as safe as possible, and we move on. And that's certainly, I'm optimistic.
It's great to have your opinion on this V-shaped, and I also hope to see it sooner rather than later. And the trend is there, and I think you know better than I do that it depends on industries and geographies, but there is a strong trend of recovery overall. Now, if you were to advise, because I'm sure some clients come to you for clarity, what should we do on? So, Andrew, how should we prioritize our operations? Should we focus on redundancy? Should we focus on diversifying our suppliers? What do you usually answer to these type of questions?
Well, I mean, look, it's very specific to the company concerned. So, no one chose this. So how I look at the scenarios, and all I can do is talk about how we've handled this at BluJay. So, we've had customers that have, through no fault of their own, literally had their business stop. And so for those customers, we absolutely have stepped out to help them, whether it be, delayed payments or whatever we needed to do. Those customers that were really heavily impacted, we've done whatever we can to help them. That's the first thing. The second thing, actually, I've had some tough conversation with some customers, because we've had companies say, because of COVID, we'd like to have longer payment terms, these sorts of things. And those companies, really have had very minimal impact as a result of COVID. And so my discussion with them is to say, look, we're all in this. And whilst I respect that, your perspective, I'm trying to help the companies that have really been impacted. They're in fashion retail, it stopped at the moment, versus, you're a food manufacturer and actually your volumes have gone up. So I have had some, conversations where I've obviously tried to help, but also others where, just been impacted a bit. Well, we're all in that. So, it's been quite hard as a leader to work through that. You don't want to be, I'll call it, challenging with customers, but I think we're all, as I said, it's a team game, and we're all in this, and everyone's impacted by COVID to some degree. And then, from my perspective, we've managed our cost base very effectively during this crisis. So I'm very pleased that we've maintained as full employment as possible. We've not taken advantage of furlough schemes, because we wanted to make sure, firstly, that we could provide resilient service to our customers. We're a mission critical solutions provider. Productivity isn't as high when you're working remotely, so we knew that. And also, as we come out of this, I wanted to make sure that I had the services, skills, and etc. to help start deploying our solutions once again, rather than being in a situation where I'm constrained to do that. So we've got people that have been ready to, we've had them working on testing and doing other things and internal training, and now we're starting to assign those back to projects as we start back up again. And I'm delighted we did that. If I'd laid people off, we wouldn't have those skills available now for those customers. So that's how we've kind of approached it, which is to be pragmatic, really manage our cost base very closely, but retain our team so that they're able to deploy our solutions. And, we're now as busy as ever, to be honest. We've just finished our first quarter of COVID working remotely, and I'm delighted that we've exceeded all of our targets in terms of bookings, growth, and everything else.
That's excellent to hear. I'm speaking with a few other clients, and I can't say they have a similar story. A lot of them are suffering in there. It's the second quarter of the year, or first with COVID, and it's definitely has impacted the business a lot. And I'm happy to hear it's different on your side. And I'm curious because you were talking about deploying solutions, implementations, and doing this process of deployment remotely. It's not by any stretch, it's a difficult thing to do. And I'm wondering what are some of the challenges and maybe some of the solutions that you have seen in implementing working remotely?
I think we're very fortunate that we're a technology company, and whilst sitting in a room as a project team together is definitely more advantageous, you don't physically need to do that. You can still configure software remotely, and yes, it's not as productive. So I think one of the first things you have to be is realistic and accept that probably teams will be around 20% less productive than they would ordinarily be if they were co-located. So there are some practical things there about just being realistic around dates and deliverables. The second thing is, as I mentioned, we as a business, and this is a real strength, are located across 14 countries, I think it is. But because we are spread, across the globe, we've used collaboration software extensively. We use Teams, we used GoToMeeting extensively from when I joined the business. And so our teams are very used to using the technology and understand it very well, which means that we can help our customers get used to it. And so that does make a difference. For many people, this has been sort of unnatural, whereas for us, it's not been the case. But also because we're in those different offices and we've been in different stages of the pandemic at different times, we can leverage those resources around the world. Our New Zealand office, as an example, they're back to work. They're not in lockdown at all, working normal days. Our Australian office was back, but being in Melbourne, they've had to go remote again. But we're going to see those sorts of things happening as well. So I think it's just about, it is the new norm and you just got to get on with it. And, I think we've been reasonably successful.
And if you look ahead, and it's not easy to look ahead, but when you're an optimist, I think it's maybe a bit easier. What's next? What are the big milestones for BluJay? Are there some expansion plans being made? What about Asia? I know we spoke before the podcast about it. Maybe you can share.
Yeah, so first thing, I'm really excited about the innovation. When I came on board, a lot of the growth had been through acquisition. So we've been very focused in making sure that those companies that we've acquired, we've integrated well into the business. We've recently done an acquisition down in Australia with Expedient Software, and we've worked very hard on that whole integration piece. And we will continue to look at strategic M&A. In this market, it's a little bit tougher, but we continue to look at those things that can be additive to the business, either through fantastic complementary IP, or indeed it's around helping us expand internationally. And you just mentioned Asia. That was us creating a greater base in Australia through Expedient. So that's the first thing. Then there's that innovation piece. We've released, I think, 4 or 5 products pretty much in lockdown. Some of those products, when I joined the business, weren't even conceptualized. They came through things like hackathons. They came through collaboration with, we mentioned LLamasoft. And in fact, we have 3 more solutions that we'll be launching later in the year. So we're coming out with some great new innovation in a way that I don't think BluJay's done for some time. So I'm really proud of that. And that's really focusing on giving our customers more capability. We really want to have a long-term relationship with our customers and give them capabilities that could help drive greater productivity, we call it the frictionless supply chain. We're really trying to automate tasks to move goods through a supply chain, and that's really what we're focused on doing. So there's a number of solutions there. And then if I look at us as a business, I want people to come and knock on the door and want to work at BluJay. We've got IP and people. That's really what we bring to bear, and we're starting to see that. I get calls a lot at the moment from people, and I know partly that may be just due to the pandemic, but they are picking the phone up and wanting to talk to me at BluJay. And if there are great people out there, always going to be open to hiring talent. I think the final point you mentioned was Asia. That's a really critical part of market for us. It's growing very quickly for us. We are very lucky to have great shareholders in Temastic, and they've been instrumental in giving us guidance about how we can focus in certain markets in Asia. And we've got a core office there in Singapore, which is a great hub for supply chain, as well as offices in the likes of New Zealand and Australia.
Yes, I have a biased opinion on Singapore and I love it here. But yeah, for sure, it's one of the best hubs in the region. And I liked what you said about hackathons. I don't hear a lot of companies in supply chain talk about this type of innovation or innovative activities. That's great to hear. And you mentioned the people and you mentioned hiring. And I wanted to take this chance to go to the part of the discussion regarding hiring, leadership, and teams. And the first question I have is to talk about culture. And you hinted about this a few times, and you said the DNA and you said the BluJay Way. But how do you define a good company culture, and what are you proud of when you're thinking about the culture at BluJay?
Yeah, so when I joined the business, they talked about the BluJay Way quite a bit, and it's certainly around team. I talked about supply chain being a team game, and I think how you define a good company culture. There's a couple of things that we've done, which is that you need to create a culture that you can make mistakes, that you can be transparent, and you also a problem shared is a problem solved. So there are some elements that we set out very quickly when I came on board to make sure that people felt that they could share challenges, talk openly, and all of those good things. But then what I did was that we set up a team chosen cross-functionally to really establish what do we mean by culture and values. And so what we stand for really has come from within. It's not come from Andrew Kirkwood. And the four kind of statements that we use: we're bold, we listen first, our mindset is open and respectful, and our approach is collaborative. And I think those four tenets really sum up the BluJay values, BluJay culture. And that's kind of what we live by. So from many respects, what I'm most proud of is that we've created what we call the BluJay Way from within, and it's not come from me, it's come from people within the company talking and thinking through what we're trying to create as a business.
I understand. And I think you mentioned at the beginning something about not necessarily desiring to be the biggest company in supply chain solutions, but be the most admired one. And I think this falls in line perfectly with that.
Absolutely. It's about being admired, being as good as we can be. And, the biggest car is not necessarily the best car, so it's not just about that. So that's kind of what we're trying to aspire to. And I look at, when I joined the business, if you ask what the goals of the business were, to some degree you get an answer like, to get EBITDA growth of this, or, it's very, I call it numbers oriented, and that's important, and to some degree that's what I'm accountable to from a board level, is achieving those financial goals. But I think you've got to translate that into something that employees, associates in the business can relate to and actually impact. And being listening, being collaborative, focusing on the customer, having that growth mindset rather than that fixed mindset, really trying to challenge themselves. If they do those things, guess what? You're going to get, great company performance. So we kind of oriented it more towards that in terms of how we talk to, employees and encourage them to be better than they are today.
And if you think about recruitment, and maybe you as a hiring manager, Andrew, how do you interview, and what are you looking for when you interview for your leadership team? What are some of the characteristics?
So yeah, my perspective is a couple of things. One is, and you'll like this, is that particularly when you're hiring senior resources, I do look for professionals to help with that, because at the end of the day, if it was that easy, these companies wouldn't exist. It's a bit, in my mind, we're a supply chain company. We're not a professional recruitment business. And having someone focus helping create that brief and all of those things, I think is really important. And having a different perspective, frankly, from outside of the business looking in. Second is I tend to interview last. What I'm trying to do is create a very cohesive team. I'm very pleased with my leadership group. We have a lot of fun together. We work really hard, and that's through cohesion. And so I get peers to interview for roles. And, obviously they're very smart people that I've got working for me. And I know that they'll ask those questions, but they'll get a sense of how that person would fit in and could they work together. And then when we've gone through that process, that's when we get a shortlist and they start to talk to me. And, my focus really is around fitting in. I can, obviously ask about what they're going to do as a business and their history and all of those things. But I'm constantly thinking, can I see you sitting at the table with my team when we're in a crisis? Are you going to be able to step forward and lead? And I think importantly, are they data driven as well? I'm a big believer in that instinct gets you so far, but you must leverage key performance indicators, leading indicators to help you drive the team. I think the final point is that they've got a track record of really good hiring, succession management, and all of those sorts of things. So they're kind of the skills, but really important because there's lots of great people out there, to be honest. It's fitting in with your team, because I can tell you if someone has a character that won't work, it doesn't matter how good they are, they will not be successful, in my opinion.
Thank you, Andrew, for saying the part at the beginning with with working with professionals. Yes, and of course I'm biased, but we do see this. And like you said, when you have an outside opinion about the profile and then you go through the process, it adds a different quality to the recruitment process. And this part of data driven, I wanted to dwell on this because I see a lot of executives who fall into the trap of thinking that if their team is data driven and if they have a strong, maybe it's a data science or engineering or even their direct reports, they have a strong enough people with data driven capacity, they don't necessarily have to do it too much, or they don't have to go into this type of mindset. What would you say to somebody who thinks that way?
Well, I think that you've got to combine data with instinct, intuition, talent, whatever you want to call it, and the two go hand in hand. So so how it's how you use the data rather than the fact that you got the data in the first place. So if you look at the data that we leverage in the business, things like product P&Ls, or as a cloud business, the data relating to disk space and CPU utilization or whatever it is, those things are fine. But if you're not tracking them and looking at trends and using them to create leading indicators so that you proactively avoid a difficult situation, then what's the point of having the data? So I think you have to combine that with obviously expertise. And then I think the other way of using data, and I can say at the moment we're looking at this within our business, is you may have an instinct about something because you've got expertise, you've got years of experience. And then what you might do is ask someone to go and get the data to prove or disprove your theory. And I think that's often something that doesn't happen enough, which is the instinct of making changes to a business, but going ahead with it without really validating whether that's correct, or maybe there's some trends that you've seen, but they're coincidences. They're not actual trends that are really there. And so that's how I like to use data within our business. And it's something, if I look back in my career, with CEOs that have been successful, I think that they've combined data and instinct and leveraged those two together.
You just mentioned this, and this is actually my next question. How do you know you are a successful CEO? What type of tool do you use to measure your success as CEO? It can be professional, personal. I'm curious to hear this about Andrew.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? So if you ask me with my instinct piece, it would be I've got happy customers, happy shareholders, happy employees. Okay, so that's how I know I'm happy. But how do I really know? Well, we have conducted customer and employee surveys, and we, since my tenure, our net promoter score, both customers and actually employees, has increased by 2 percentage points, and that's great. And we're going to continue to work on that. So, you can meet customers, but only so many. And so, measuring that you think you're improving and being very open about that is really important. And then obviously I talk about shareholders. Well, that comes into things like the performance of the company. And again, that's that data approach. But for me, as I said, it's that process where, if I've got customers, even when I hate disappointed customers. It's the worst conversation to have. But when you're transparent with them, explaining what went wrong and what you're doing about it, and the response from the customer is, yes, I'm happy that this happened, but I'm really pleased that you've identified the cause, you're taking proactive action, and we've worked with you for a number of years, and we're confident that you're going to work with us and continue to improve. When I get those sorts of reactions, it reaffirms those data points. It's telling me that customers are wanting to work with us, and the same with employees. And we had some challenges recently, and an ex-employee's moved on and has gone on to other career things, actually took a phone call and helped us out with some ideas. I reached out to him on LinkedIn to just say thank you, and he's just come back and said, no problem, I'm always looking out for BluJay. So it's almost like, we've created this sort of family that's not just of alumni that aren't just within the business, but also externally. So to me, that's a great sign.
Yeah, that's the long-term game.
Absolutely.
And for the last question for today, I was wondering, because we have different type of listeners. Some are at the beginning of their career, most are already well into their professional career. Maybe they're thinking about doing or making a change. Some of them might be affected because of what's happening. What would be a piece of advice that you've received or you would give to our listeners for a successful career?
It's not lucky, or it's not about luck, is the advice I would give. Analyze yourself and think about how you can improve. So focus on the bad things, the tough things, not the good things. It's easy to kind of pat yourself on the back. So, the growth mindset is certainly something that I really believe in. You can always teach a dog new tricks. We constantly improve, but it's not easy. If you pick up a guitar or try and play the piano, it takes practice, or learn a language. I think career and those sorts of things is certainly not straightforward. You can read lots of books and they're very helpful. But what I've done is I've really observed people in action. And as I said, I've tried to take the best bits of what I've seen and combine that with my personality to create the person I am today. And that's what I would encourage people to do. And I think this is where, I'm slightly at odds with some of I'll call it the new news, is that companies are going to be actively encouraging remote working forever and all of these things. And for me, with my experience, I can sit at home and work, and I'd like to be in an office. But I think for those who are starting out in their career, being in an office where they can observe people at work is hugely important. And you can't do that via video. It's very difficult. You have to be invited. And so, we're certainly going to be back to work. We might have to operate, differently with sort of mixed shifts and things like that because of distancing. But we're going to be absolutely leveraging offices. I think it helps create innovation. We've invested in new offices in Manchester, in Hyderabad. We just signed lease for new offices in Christchurch. I could go on. This is something we're going to continue doing, because that's how you get, people on the beginning of their careers to observe, learn, and collaborate to create innovation. And I'm a big believer in that.
And on that note, thank you very much, Andrew, for the sharing. And I wish you and BluJay all the best and great success, and even bigger growth and more people and more customers to admire you.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you. And for those listeners, if you're interested in BluJay, please reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll be delighted to try and help you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to go to www.elcottglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest updates first. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify or Stitcher, we would appreciate a kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives in supply chain or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.